My name is Tiana Washington, and I'm 66 years old. What I'm about to tell you changed everything I thought I knew about my family, about love, and about the price of truth. The morning of Ernest's funeral, I woke up at 4:37 a.m. I know the exact time because I'd been watching the clock all night, watching the hours slip away until I'd have to say goodbye to the man I'd spent 42 years loving. The rain was already falling when I got dressed, pulling on the same black dress I'd worn to my mother's funeral back in 1998. I couldn't afford a new one, and honestly I didn't care. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. 3 days. It had only been 3 days since Ernest died, but I looked like I'd aged 10 years. My hands shook as I tried to pin up my gray hair. I gave up and let it fall loose around my shoulders. Ernest always liked it that way anyway. "You're still beautiful, Tiana," he used to say, running his fingers through my hair on quiet Sunday mornings. "Just like the day I met you." But that morning I didn't feel beautiful. I felt hollow. Spring Creek Cemetery sits on a hill overlooking the town where Ernest and I built our life together. It's a small place, just a few hundred graves, most of them belonging to people we knew. Old Mr. Henderson, who used to give us vegetables from his garden. Mrs. Patricia, who taught both our boys in Sunday school. All of them watching now as we laid Ernest to rest among them. The rain came down harder as I stood at the graveside, my cheap umbrella doing little to keep me dry. I counted the people who came. 7. 7 people showed up to say goodbye to a man who'd lived in this town for 70 years. There was Pastor Williams, of course, who'd known Ernest since he was a boy. Aaliyah, my best friend since high school, stood close beside me, her hand gripping mine. Darius, Ernest's co-worker from the auto shop, stood in the back, his face wet with rain and tears. And then there were my sons. Deshaun, 43, stood to my right. Tall, handsome, dressed in an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. His wife, Jasmine, clung to his arm, her designer heels sinking into the wet grass. She kept checking her phone, not even trying to hide it. Kendrick, 41, stood to my left. He looked more like his father than Deshaun ever did, same broad shoulders, same strong jaw. But where Ernest's eyes had always been warm, Kendrick's were distant, cold even. He stared at the casket like it was a business transaction, not his father's body. Something was wrong. A mother knows these things. I'd raised these boys. I'd nursed them through fevers, comforted them through nightmares, bandaged their scraped knees. I knew every expression on their faces, every tone in their voices. And standing there at their father's funeral, I knew with a certainty that made my blood run cold that something was very, very wrong. Deshaun wasn't crying, not a single tear. He kept glancing at Kendrick with these quick, nervous looks. And Kendrick kept checking his watch. What kind of son checks his watch at his father's funeral? Pastor Williams began to speak. Ernest Washington was a good man, a faithful husband, a hard-working member of our community. I stopped listening. Instead, I watched my sons, watched the way they shifted their weight, the way Deshaun's jaw clenched when the pastor mentioned devoted father, the way Kendrick's eyes darted toward the parking lot like he couldn't wait to leave. "Why so few people?" I whispered to Aaliyah. She squeezed my hand. Deshaun said he wanted to keep it small, private. He made all the arrangements so quickly I don't think word got around. "Ernest would have wanted more people here," I said. "He loved this town. These people were his family." "I know, honey. I know." The service was brief. Too brief. 15 minutes start to finish. Ernest deserved more than 15 minutes. As Pastor Williams said the final prayer, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I almost ignored it, who texts during a funeral, but something made me look. Unknown number. I opened the message and my world tilted on its axis. "He's not dead. They killed the wrong person. Trust no one, not even your sons." My hand started shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. The words blurred and refocused, blurred and refocused. "He's not dead. They killed the wrong person." "Mom," Deshaun's voice cut through my shock. "Mom, are you okay?" I looked up at him. His eyes were wide concerned, or was that fear? I couldn't tell anymore. I didn't know anything anymore. "I'm fine," I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Just a message from the insurance company." "Already?" Jasmine's perfectly painted eyebrows rose. That was fast. Too fast, I thought. Everything about this has been too fast. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the bed Ernest and I had shared for 42 years, staring at his empty pillow, and let myself remember. I met Ernest Washington in the summer of 1982. I was 24 years old, working double shifts as a nursing assistant at Spring Creek Medical Center, trying to save enough money to go back to school. He was 26, running a small auto repair shop he'd inherited from his father. It wasn't love at first sight, not for me anyway. Ernest was persistent, though. He'd come into the diner where I ate lunch every day, always managing to sit at the counter right next to me. He'd make these terrible jokes trying to get me to smile. "What do you call a bear with no teeth?" he'd ask, grinning. "I don't know, Ernest." "A gummy bear." I'd roll my eyes, but inside I was smiling. It took him 3 months to work up the courage to ask me out. 3 months of bad jokes and shy glances and awkward conversation. When he finally did ask me standing outside that diner on a Tuesday evening, his hands shaking, I said yes before he'd even finished the question. We were married 6 months later. Small ceremony at Pastor Williams' church, just family and a few friends. We couldn't afford anything fancy. Ernest wore his father's old suit, and my wedding dress came from a consignment shop downtown. But I felt like a queen walking down that aisle toward him. Deshawn was born in 1982, right after we married. I still remember Ernest crying when he held his son for the first time. "I'm going to give him everything I never had," he whispered. Everything. Kendrick came along in 1984, 2 boys 2 years apart. I thought my heart would burst from happiness. We weren't rich. God knows we were far from rich. Ernest worked 6 days a week at the shop, sometimes 7 when money was tight. I picked up extra shifts whenever I could. We lived in a small 2-bedroom house on Maple Street, the same house I was lying in now alone for the first time in 42 years. But we had love. We had each other. We had our boys. When did it all go wrong? Maybe it started when Deshawn turned 15. He came home from school one day angry about something I can't even remember what, and said something I've never forgotten. "I hate being poor," he told Ernest. "All my friends have nice things. Why can't we have nice things?" Ernest had been so patient. "Son, we have everything we need. We have food on the table, a roof over our heads." "That's not enough," Deshawn shouted. "I want more than this. I don't want to end up like you working myself to death for nothing." I watched Ernest's face crumble. He never said anything, just went out to the garage and stayed there for hours. Kendrick followed his brother's lead the way he always did. By the time they were in their 20s, both boys had moved away, chasing money and success in ways Ernest and I never understood. Deshawn got into real estate. Made good money, or so he said. Bought a house worth $200,000 in an upscale neighborhood across town. Kendrick became some kind of investment consultant. I never quite understood what that meant. He owned a condo downtown that cost even more. They stopped visiting, stopped calling except on holidays, and even then the conversations were brief and awkward. "How's business?" Ernest would ask. "Fine, Dad. Listen, I gotta go." Click. When they did come over, they'd look around our modest home with barely concealed embarrassment. Jasmine, Deshawn's wife, made it worse. She'd wrinkle her nose at our worn furniture comment on how vintage everything looked, and not in a good way. "Mom," Dad Deshawn said during one visit last Christmas, "you really should consider moving. This neighborhood isn't what it used to be." "This is our home," Ernest replied quietly. "We raised you boys here." "Exactly. Don't you think it's time for an upgrade?" But we didn't want an upgrade. We wanted our sons back. The boys who used to help Ernest in the garage, who used to hug me goodnight, who used to love us without conditions. Those boys were gone. And now so was Ernest. I needed to face it. Needed to remember the day that changed everything, even though it hurt to think about. 3 weeks ago, a Tuesday morning just like any other, Ernest had kissed me goodbye at 6:30 a.m., grabbed his thermos of coffee, and headed to the shop. "Love you, Tiana," he said from the doorway like he did every morning. "Love you too," I called back. Those were the last words we spoke when everything was still normal. The call came at 10:17 a.m. I was folding laundry, thinking about what to make for dinner when my phone rang. Deshawn's name flashed on the screen. "Mom," his voice was shaking. "You need to get to Memorial Hospital right now. Dad's been in an accident." The world stopped. "What kind of accident? Is he okay?" "Just come, please." I drove to that hospital faster than I've ever driven in my life. Aaliyah's grandson drove me. I was shaking too badly to hold the steering wheel. The whole way there, I prayed. Prayed harder than I'd ever prayed in my life. When I got to the emergency room, Deshawn and Kendrick were already there. That should have been my first clue. I'd called them from the car, left frantic voicemails. How did they get there before me? The shop was only 5 minutes from my house, but 20 minutes from Deshawn's office. But in my panic, I didn't think about it. Where is he? I grabbed Deshawn's arm. Where's your father? ICU. Mom, it's bad. Really bad. Doctor. Patricia Morrison, I knew her from my nursing days, came out to talk to us. Her face was grave. Mrs. Washington, your husband has a severe head injury. According to the paramedics, he fell at his shop, hit his head on a concrete workbench. The impact caused significant brain trauma and internal bleeding. But he'll be okay? My voice cracked. He'll recover. Dr. Morrison's pause said everything. We're doing everything we can. The next 48 hours are critical. They let me see him one at a time, 5 minutes only. I'll never forget walking into that ICU room. Ernest looked so small in that hospital bed, hooked up to machines that breathed for him, fed him, kept his heart beating. His head was wrapped in bandages. His face was so pale, so still. I took his hand, his strong, calloused hand that had held mine for 42 years, and whispered, Ernest, I'm here. Stay with me. Please stay with me. His fingers twitched, just slightly, but I felt it. He squeezed my hand. I called to the nurse. He knows I'm here. But the nurse just smiled sadly. Sometimes there are involuntary responses, Mrs. Washington. Don't get your hopes up. For 3 days, I practically lived at that hospital. Slept in the waiting room chairs, barely ate, just sat by Ernest's bed whenever they'd let me in. Deshawn and Kendrick came and went, always on their phones, always talking in low voices with the doctors about things they wouldn't explain to me. On the 3rd night, I fell asleep in the chair beside Ernest's bed. At some point, I felt someone touch my shoulder. Mom, you should go home and rest. It was Kendrick. His face was strange in the dim light of the hospital room. Not sad, not worried, just blank. I want to stay with your father, I said. Mom, you're exhausted. Let me sit with Dad tonight. You go home, take a real shower, sleep in a real bed. I'll call you if anything changes. I was so tired, too tired to argue, so I let him convince me. That was at midnight. At 4:37 a.m. that number again, my phone rang. Mom, Kendrick's voice was flat, emotionless. Dad's gone. His heart stopped at 4:15. They tried to revive him, but he's gone. I remember screaming. Remember Aaliyah's grandson driving me back to the hospital in the dark, me sobbing the whole way. Remember the doctor telling me they'd done everything they could, that sometimes these things just happen, that Ernest hadn't suffered. Lies. All lies. But I didn't know that yet. The funeral came 3 days later. So fast. Too fast. Deshawn made all the arrangements, picked the cheapest casket, the shortest service a plot in the far corner of the cemetery. It's what Dad would have wanted, he said. Simple. No fuss. But as I stood there in the rain reading that text message over and over, he's not dead. They killed the wrong person. I realized something that chilled me to my core. I didn't know what my husband would have wanted anymore. That night I sat alone in my kitchen staring at that text message until the words blurred. He's not dead. They killed the wrong person. Who sent this? And why? Part of me wanted to believe it was some sick joke. Some cruel person who got their kicks from tormenting grieving widows. But another part of me, the part that had noticed my son's strange behavior at the funeral, wondered if there was truth hidden in those words. At 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Check the garage. Ernest left something for you. Corner workbench, red toolbox underneath the false bottom. My heart stopped. The red toolbox. Ernest's father had given him that toolbox when he'd inherited the auto shop. Ernest kept it at the garage downtown, not at home. Nobody knew about the false bottom except Ernest and me. He'd shown it to me years ago, a secret compartment where he kept important papers. So how did this person know I should have been scared? A 66-year-old woman alone with someone sending her mysterious messages in the middle of the night. But I wasn't scared. I was angry. Angry at the secrets. Angry at the lies. Angry at the feeling that I'd been living in a fog for weeks and was only now starting to see clearly. I grabbed my coat and car keys. Where are you going? Aaliyah had stayed with me after the funeral. She appeared in the kitchen doorway wrapped in one of my old robes. Tiana, it's almost midnight. I need to check something at Ernest's shop. Now, girl, whatever it is can wait until morning. No, I said quietly. It can't. Something in my voice must have convinced her because she didn't argue. Just grabbed her own coat and said, "Then I'm coming with you." The inside smelled like oil and metal and faintly like Ernest's cologne. My throat tightened. I'd avoided coming here since his death. Couldn't bear to see his workspace without him in it. "What are we looking for?" Aaliyah whispered, though there was no one else around. "Red toolbox, corner workbench." I found it exactly where it had always been. The toolbox was old, scratched, the red paint faded to pink in spots. I opened it. Wrenches, sockets, screwdrivers, all organized exactly how Ernest liked them. My fingers found the small latch hidden on the inside rim. Pressed it. The bottom of the toolbox popped up, revealing a hidden compartment beneath. Inside was a USB drive. "What is that?" Aaliyah leaned closer. "I don't know, but my hands were shaking as I picked it up." "Let's find out." We went back to my house. I dug out the old laptop Ernest had bought me 3 years ago. I barely knew how to use it, but Ernest had insisted I learn. "You need to keep up with technology, Tiana," he'd said. Now I plugged in the USB drive with trembling fingers. One video file, dated 3 weeks ago, the day before Ernest's accident. I clicked play. Ernest's face filled the screen. He was in the garage, must have propped the camera up on something. His face was haggard, exhausted, and when he spoke, his voice cracked. "Tiana," he began, and I started crying immediately. "If you're watching this, then I'm already gone, and I need you to know the truth." "Oh my God," Aaliyah breathed beside me. Ernest's image continued. "Our sons, Deshaun and Kendrick. They've been planning to kill me. I know how that sounds. I know what you're thinking, not our boys, not the babies we raised. But it's true, Tiana. I've heard them talking. I've seen the evidence." He held up papers to the camera. Insurance documents. 2 months ago, Deshaun convinced me to increase my life insurance. Said it was to protect you if something happened to me. I trusted him. Signed the papers. $125,000, Tiana. That's what my life is worth to them. My stomach churned. And it gets worse. Ernest shuffled through more papers. Deshaun owes $70,000 to some loan shark in the city. I found these collection notices in his trash when I fixed his car last month. And Kendrick? He shook his head. Kendrick's been gambling. Underground poker games. He's in the hole for at least $50,000. "Jesus," Aaliyah whispered. "They need money," Ernest continued. "Desperately. And they see me as the solution. Yesterday I overheard them talking in Deshaun's car. They didn't know I was in the shop. They were discussing how to do it. How to make it look like an accident." He paused, wiping his eyes. "I wanted to tell you, Tiana. Wanted to go to the police. But I need proof. Real proof. So I'm going to give them the chance to show who they really are. I'm going to—" The video cut off abruptly. "What?" I shouted at the screen. "You're going to what?" But the video was over. Just black screen and silence. I sat there staring at nothing, my mind reeling. My sons. My babies, planning to murder their own father. "Tiana," Aaliyah's voice was thick with tears. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to find out the truth," I said. "All of it." The next morning I started digging. First stop, Spring Creek Community Bank. I'd been banking there for 35 years. Keisha Thompson, the branch manager, had known me since she was in high school. "Tiana," she greeted me with a sad smile. "I'm so sorry about Ernest. How are you holding up?" "I'm managing. Keisha, I need to see our account statements, the last 6 months. Something flickered across her face. "Of course, let me pull those up." She printed them out, handed them across the desk. I scanned the numbers, my heart sinking with each line. $3,000 withdrawn in January, $5,000 in February, $7,000 in March. "Keisha, I didn't make these withdrawals." "No," she said carefully. "Ernest did. He came in personally each time." "Did he say what the money was for?" Another pause. "He said home repairs." "But Tiana," she lowered her voice. "The last time he came in, he didn't look good. He seemed nervous, distracted, and what? Deshaun was with him. Said he was helping his dad with the paperwork because Ernest's eyes weren't what they used to be." She met my gaze. But Ernest was wearing his glasses, and he saw fine. My blood ran cold. Deshaun was there for all the withdrawals. At least twice that I saw personally, maybe more. $15,000. Gone. And my son had been there, helping. I left the bank and drove straight to Terrell Davis Insurance. Terrell had been Ernest's insurance agent for 20 years. Mrs. Washington, Terrell stood up when I entered, genuine grief on his face. I can't tell you how sorry I am. Ernest was a good man. Thank you, Terrell. I need to ask you about his life insurance policy. Of course, the paperwork should be finalized soon. $125,000, which should help you. When did he increase it? Terrell blinked. I'm sorry. Ernest used to have a $25,000 policy. When did he increase it to $125,000? Oh, that was... He shuffled through files. 4 months ago. His son came with him, actually. Deshaun. Said Ernest wanted to make sure you were taken care of. Deshaun suggested it. Well, yes, he was very insistent. Said his father was getting older, needed better protection. Ernest seemed reluctant at first, but Deshaun convinced him. Of course he did. My last stop was Ernest's garage. This time I went in daylight, really looked around. If Ernest had fallen and hit his head like Deshaun claimed, there should be signs. Blood, damage, something. But the garage was pristine. Clean. Too clean. Can I help you? I jumped. Darius, Ernest's longtime employee, stood in the doorway. He was a big man, mid-50s, with kind eyes that were red-rimmed now. Darius, I didn't know you were working today. Thought I'd come in, clean up a bit. Can't quite believe he's gone, you know. He walked over, stood beside me. You looking for something? The accident, I said. Where did it happen? Darius's expression changed, became guarded. What do you mean? Ernest fell, hit his head. Where, Mrs. Washington, I wasn't here that morning. When I came in around noon, everything was already cleaned up. Cleaned up by who? Your sons. They said they didn't want you to see the blood and all. But there was no blood. I could see it in Darius's eyes. He knew something was wrong, too. Darius, I said quietly, what really happened that morning? He looked torn. Finally, he said, I got here at 6 a.m. like always. Ernest was already here working on the Henderson's Ford. Around 9:30, Deshaun showed up, said he wanted to talk to his dad about something private, so I went to grab coffee. When I came back 20 minutes later, he swallowed hard. The ambulance was here. Ernest was on the floor, and Deshaun was on the phone crying, saying his dad had fallen. But you don't think he fell? I think... Darius chose his words carefully. I think something else happened in those 20 minutes I was gone. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. You're getting close, but you're looking at the wrong person. Meet me at Clara's Diner 6 p.m. Come alone. I'll be in the last booth. Every instinct told me not to go. This could be dangerous. This could be a trap. But I had to know. Clara's Diner was a Spring Creek institution, been there since the 1950s. At 6 p.m. it was moderately busy, mostly elderly couples having early dinner. I walked to the last booth, my heart pounding. Someone was already there, face hidden behind a menu. When the menu lowered, I nearly fell over. It was Jasmine, my daughter-in-law, Deshaun's wife. Sit down, she said quietly, before anyone sees us together. I slid into the booth, my mind racing. You've been sending me those messages. Yes. Why? Jasmine's perfect makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes, the worry lines around her mouth. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Because I'm scared, she whispered. Because I made a mistake. Because... Her voice broke. Because I know what Deshaun did, and if I don't tell someone, I'm going to lose my mind. My hands clenched into fists. What did he do, Jasmine? Tell me. She glanced around nervously, then leaned forward. Deshaun killed Ernest. Him and Kendrick together. They planned it for months. I heard them talking. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things, but how? My voice was barely audible. How did they do it? The garage, that morning. Deshaun went there with... She paused. With insulin. He's diabetic, you know that. But what you don't know is that concentrated insulin can kill someone if you inject enough of it. Makes it look like a heart attack or stroke. My vision swam. And he was going to inject Ernest, make it look natural. But when he got there, Jasmine's eyes filled with tears. Ernest was already on the ground, already dying. He'd fallen and hit his head just like Deshaun told everyone, just like the doctor said. I stared at her. You're saying Ernest really did fall? It was actually an accident? No. Jasmine shook her head frantically. You don't understand. Deshaun got there, saw Ernest on the ground, saw the head injury, and he realized this was better than his plan. No injection needed. No evidence. Just a tragic accident. So She covered her mouth with her hand. He what, Jasmine? He waited. He didn't call 911 for 45 minutes. Just stood there with his phone in his hand while Ernest lay dying on that concrete floor. By the time the ambulance arrived, the damage was done. Ernest might have survived if Deshaun had called immediately, but he didn't. He let him die. The diner spun around me. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling. Why are you telling me this? I managed to ask. Because I can't live with it. Jasmine's voice rose, then dropped to a frantic whisper. Because Deshaun is talking about doing the same thing to you. The insurance money isn't enough. He wants the house, the savings, everything. And you're in the way. He wants to kill me too. Yes. A tear rolled down her cheek, smearing her mascara. I know I should have told you sooner. I know I should have gone to the police, but I was scared. I still am. Deshaun isn't the man I married. The debt, the pressure, it's changed him into someone I don't recognize. Someone capable of... Jasmine. I reached across the table, grabbed her hand. We have to go to the police, right now. You have to tell them everything. But she pulled away, shaking her head. I can't. Don't you understand I have no proof? It's just my word against his. And if he finds out I talked to you... She stood up abruptly. I shouldn't have come. This was a mistake. Wait. But she was already walking away, practically running toward the exit. I sat there alone in that booth, my whole world crumbling around me. My son had murdered his father, had watched him die, and now he was planning to do the same to me. And the worst part, the part that made me want to scream, I believed her. Every word. My phone buzzed. Another text from an unknown number, but different from the first one. Mom, we need to talk. Come to Kendrick's house tonight at 9. Both of us will be there. It's time you knew the truth. It was from Deshaun's number. He wasn't even hiding anymore. I looked at that message for a long time. I should call the police. I should run. I should do anything except walk into a house with two men who'd already killed once and were planning to kill again. But Ernest deserved justice. And I deserved the truth. So at 8:45 p.m. I got in my car and started driving toward my son's house. I was done being afraid. It was time to face my boys. Kendrick's house was in Cedar Heights, the expensive part of town where Ernest and I had never belonged. Massive homes with perfectly manicured lawns, 3-car garages, the kind of neighborhood where people hired others to decorate their Christmas trees. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. Strange that. I should have been terrified driving toward a confrontation with two men who'd let their father die. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was something else entirely. I was ready. The house was dark except for a single light in the living room. I parked on the street, walked up the stone pathway, and rang the doorbell. It echoed inside like a death knell. Deshaun opened the door. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot. He'd been drinking. Mom! He stepped aside. Thanks for coming. Did I have a choice? Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe at my tone. I'd always been the soft one, the peacemaker, the mother who forgave everything. Not tonight. Kendrick was in the living room, pacing like a caged animal. He looked worse than Deshaun, unshaven, his shirt wrinkled, his hands shaking. Sit down, Mom, Deshaun said, gesturing to the leather couch that probably cost more than my car. I'll stand. The brothers exchanged glances. Mom, Kendrick began, his voice cracking. We know what you think. Do you? I cut him off. Do you know what I think? That I raised two murderers. That the babies I nursed, the boys I sacrificed everything for, let their father die on a garage floor because they needed money. It wasn't like that, Deshaun said, but his voice was weak. Then tell me what it was like. I pulled out my phone, showed them the video Ernest had made. Tell me how this wasn't exactly what it looks like. Kendrick made a sound like a wounded animal. Deshaun's face went pale. Where did you get that? Deshaun whispered. Your father left it for me. Along with evidence of your debts, your gambling, your plans to increase his insurance. I stepped closer to them. So tell me the truth. All of it. Because I'm going to the police tomorrow morning, and this is your last chance to explain yourselves. The silence stretched out thick and suffocating. Finally, Kendrick collapsed onto a chair, his head in his hands. We didn't kill him, Mom. I swear to God we didn't kill him. You let him die. Yes. The word came out as a sob. Yes, we let him die. But we didn't. We weren't the ones who... He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. Mom, you have to understand, we were desperate. The debts, the pressure, we couldn't think straight. Deshaun still stood rigid, his jaw clenched. That morning, he said, his voice flat, I went to the garage with insulin. Concentrated doses. I was going to inject Dad, make it look like a heart attack. He met my eyes. Yes, Mom, I was going to kill our father. The words hung in the air like poison. But when I got there, Deshaun continued, Dad was already on the ground, blood coming from his head. He'd fallen, hit the corner of the workbench. He was still alive, barely conscious, reaching for his phone. I could see it. Ernest lying there in pain, scared, reaching for help. And you watched. I panicked, Deshaun said. I stood there with the insulin in my pocket and I thought, this is better. No injection, no evidence, just a tragic accident. So his voice broke. I called Kendrick instead of 911. I got there 20 minutes later, Kendrick whispered. Dad was still alive, still breathing, but barely. And Deshaun said, I said we should wait, Deshaun finished. Just a little longer. Make sure he was really gone before we called. Because if he survived, if he woke up and told people what really happened, that I was there and didn't help, you'd be exposed, I finished. So you let your father die slowly on that cold concrete floor, gasping for breath in pain, wondering why his sons weren't helping him. Mom, please. Kendrick reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't touch me. We called 911 after 45 minutes, Deshaun said. Told them we just arrived, just found him. The doctor said he might have survived if we'd called immediately. Might have had a chance. He laughed bitterly. But we made sure he didn't. I stared at my sons, these strangers wearing my children's faces, and felt something break inside me. Not my heart. That had broken days ago. Something deeper. Some fundamental belief that family meant something, that love could overcome anything, that the boys I'd raised couldn't be capable of this. There's something else you need to know, I said quietly. What? Deshaun frowned. I pulled out my phone, opened the second video file on the USB drive. The one I'd watched alone last night, the one that had changed everything. Ernest made another video, the same day. Want to see it? I pressed play. Ernest's face filled my phone screen again, but this time he looked different. Calmer, almost at peace. Tiana, his recorded voice began. By now you've seen the first video. You know what our sons are planning. But there's something else you need to know. Something I haven't told anyone except Dr. Morrison. Deshaun and Kendrick leaned forward, confusion on their faces. 4 weeks ago, Ernest continued, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, inoperable. The doctor gave me 2, maybe 3 months, maybe less. The room went silent. Even my heartbeat seemed to stop. I'm dying, Tiana. I've been dying this whole time. And when I found out what our boys were planning, his voice hardened. I couldn't let them become murderers, not real ones. So I decided to give them what they wanted. My death, but on my terms. No, Kendrick breathed. No, no, no. That morning, Ernest said, I'm going to create an accident. I'm going to hit my head, make it look real, and then I'm going to wait and see what Deshaun does when he arrives. Will he help me? Will he call for help? Or will he do exactly what I think he'll do? Let me die and take the insurance money. My vision blurred with tears. This is my gift to you, son. Ernest looked directly at the camera. A chance to not be a real killer. You'll think you murdered me. You'll live with that guilt. But technically I did this to myself. I saved you from becoming the person you were about to become. And when the truth comes out, and it will come out because Tiana will make sure of it, maybe, just maybe, you'll understand that everything I did was to save your soul. The video ended. The silence in that room was deafening. He killed himself. Kendrick's voice was barely a whisper. To trap us. No, I said. He was already dying. He just controlled how it happened, and he made sure you'd be caught. Deshaun had gone white. So we didn't actually kill him. You let him die. You delayed calling for help. That's still manslaughter at minimum. Failure to render aid. Maybe murder, depending on what the prosecutor decides. I looked at them both. But Ernest was right about one thing. He saved you from being actual murderers. Because if he'd been healthy that morning, if you'd gone through with your plan, there would be no redemption for you. No possibility of forgiveness. Mom! Kendrick stood up, tears streaming down his face. Did you know about Dad's plan? This was the moment I'd been dreading. I could lie, tell them I was as shocked as they were, let them believe their mother was an innocent victim in all this. But I was done with lies. Yes, I said quietly. I knew. What? Deshawn stared at me like I'd slapped him. 5 weeks ago, your father came home from the doctor's office. Told me about the cancer. We sat on our porch holding hands and he cried. Because he was scared. Not of dying, he'd made peace with that. He was scared of leaving me alone. Scared of what would happen to our family. I remembered that evening like it was yesterday, the sunset painting the sky pink and gold, Ernest's hand trembling in mine. And then 2 weeks later, he heard you two. I looked at my sons. He was at Deshawn's house fixing your car like he always did. You didn't know he was still there, and he heard you planning to kill him. Kendrick made a choking sound. He came home that night, I continued, and he told me everything. At first I wanted to call the police, but Ernest said no. He said, my voice cracked. He said, Tiana, I'm dying anyway, but if I die at their hands, they'll be murderers forever. Their souls will be damned. But if I control this, if I create a situation where they think they've killed me, but haven't really, maybe they can still be saved. So you helped him, Deshawn said. His voice was hollow. You knew he was going to and you let him. I tried to talk him out of it. For days I begged him to just go to the police to get you both arrested before you could do anything. But he wouldn't. He said he'd rather die knowing he'd tried to save your souls than live a few more weeks knowing his sons had become monsters. So the whole time, Kendrick whispered, at the hospital at the funeral, you knew. You knew what we'd done. You knew about Dad's plan. And you just watched us. I watched you show exactly who you'd become, I said. I watched you stand at your father's grave and not shed a single tear. I watched you push me to sell the house to sign over the insurance money. I watched you prove that your father was right. You'd chosen money over love. But Jasmine, Deshawn said suddenly, she sent you those messages. Actually, a voice said from the doorway. I didn't. We all turned. Jasmine stood there, but she wasn't alone. Behind her was Sergeant Malcolm Johnson, and behind him 3 uniformed officers. I'm sorry, Deshawn, Jasmine said, tears running down her mascara. But I couldn't be part of this anymore. Jasmine was the one who came to me, Sergeant Johnson said, stepping forward. 3 days ago. Told me everything she'd overheard. We've been building a case since then. He looked at me. And Mrs. Washington attorney Rashad Williams contacted us yesterday with video evidence from your late husband, along with his medical records confirming terminal cancer and detailed notes about his plan. Wait, Deshawn's eyes darted between us. So the messages who sent the messages, I did. I said is said. The first one at the funeral was to see your reaction. The second one was to lead me to the USB drive that Ernest and I had planted together. We needed to build a case against you. We needed evidence. And we needed you to think you were getting away with it so you'd incriminate yourselves further. You set us up, Kendrick whispered. You and Dad, you set us up. No, I said firmly. You set yourselves up the moment you decided money was worth more than your father's life. Ernest and I just made sure justice would be served. Sergeant Johnson pulled out handcuffs. Deshawn Washington Kendrick Washington, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and failure to render aid resulting in death. You have the right to remain silent. I watched as they handcuffed my sons, watched Kendrick sob, watched Deshawn's face crumble as the reality hit him he was going to prison. They both were. Mom, Kendrick cried as the officers led him toward the door. Mom, please, we're sorry. We're so sorry. Please don't let them. I love you, I said. My voice was steady. I will always love you, but I love your father more, and I loved the men you could have been more than I loved the men you became. They took my sons away. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. Video testimony from Ernest recorded before his death, authenticated by multiple witnesses, medical records showing the cancer, bank statements, insurance documents, and most damning of all testimony from Darius about the 45-minute gap before 911 was called. The jury took 4 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Deshawn received 20 years. Kendrick, because he showed remorse and cooperated with prosecutors, got 15. I visited Kendrick in prison last week. Not Deshaun, he still won't see me, still blames me for setting them up. But Kendrick's different. Prison has changed him. Or maybe it's just brought out who he really was, buried under years of greed and poor choices. I understand now, he told me through the glass partition. What Dad did. He didn't kill himself to punish us. He did it to save us. How do you figure? I asked. If we'd gone through with it, if we'd actually murdered him when he was healthy, we'd be monsters. Irredeemable. But this way, he wiped his eyes. This way we have to live with what we chose to do, but we also have to live with the knowledge that Dad loved us enough to die in a way that might give us a chance at redemption someday. I reached toward the glass. Your father always believed in second chances. Do you? Kendrick looked at me with Ernest's eyes. Do you believe we can be redeemed? I believe, I said carefully, that it's not about what I believe. It's about what you do with the years you have left. You can waste them in bitterness, or you can use them to become the men your father hoped you'd be. Today I sat on my porch, the same porch where Ernest and I had our last real conversation, and opened the final letter he'd left for me. Rashad Williams had given it to me with instructions not to open it until after the trial. My dearest Tiana, if you're reading this, it's over. Our boys have been judged, sentenced, and now they're beginning to pay for their choices. I know this has been impossibly hard on you. I know you've had to live with the weight of our secret, had to watch our sons grieve for a father they thought they'd killed, had to pretend ignorance when you knew the truth all along. I'm sorry for that burden, but I'm not sorry for what we did. We gave them a chance, Tiana, a chance to choose love over greed, family over money. They failed that test. But because of how we set things up, they failed in a way that leaves room for grace. They're not murderers, not technically. They're guilty of terrible choices, but not irredeemable ones. In 15 to 20 years, they'll be free. They'll be old men, but they'll be free. And maybe, just maybe, they'll have used that time to become the sons we always hoped they'd be. Live well, my love. Don't grieve for me. I was dying anyway, and I got to die knowing I'd done everything I could to save our boys' souls. I love you forever. Ernest. I folded the letter, placed it in the Bible Ernest had given me on our wedding day, and looked out at the street where we'd raised our family. The house is quiet now, too quiet. But I'm not alone. I have Aaliyah who visits every day. I have my church community. I have the memories of 42 years with a man who loved me enough to die for our children's souls. And I have hope. Hope that someday when Deshaun and Kendrick walk out of those prison doors, they'll be the men Ernest and I always believed they could be. Until then, I'll be here, in the house we built together, keeping the flowers alive in Ernest's garden, waiting, because that's what mothers do. We wait, we hope, we love, even when it breaks our hearts.